Hello and welcome to another episode of the Chrissie Mayr podcast. We are on iTunes, YouTube, Spotify, and SoundCloud. And if you're listening to us right now on iTunes, please go and leave a 5-star review. For example, this review from I Love Bubbly. Ryan is a psych op. For someone who claims to be Mr. Edgy 21 Agenda, blah, blah, Ryan is a moron. They're talking about off the grid, Ryan. Trump did not lose at all, and he will win this battle. No thanks to people like Ryan who give up and roll over and take it. Gross. Trump won by a landslide, and I work in cybersecurity and have seen the digital evidence, and it's damning against Biden. Also, 3 of our Supreme Court justices were on Bush's law team that defended him and beat Gore. This guest is an expert on nothing. Other than that, I love Chrissie, who is hilarious, open-minded, and non-judgmental. How refreshing she is in a world of haters. Love this podcast. Oh, thanks. I love Bubbly. I love these reviews. You know what else I love? Lucy Nicotine Gum, who is our sponsor for this month. Lucy Nicotine is a company founded by Caltech scientists and former smokers looking for a better and cleaner nicotine alternative. Finally, tobacco alternatives that don't suck. These products were researched and developed for 3 years to be made for people, not patients. Lucy has created a nicotine gum with 4 milligrams of nicotine that comes in wintergreen, cinnamon, and pomegranate. Lucy also has a lozenge with 4 milligrams of nicotine in a cherry ice flavor. Each and every flavor actually tastes great. I've chewed some myself. It doesn't taste like cigarettes, which is what I thought it would. It's just good. It's convenient, discreet. These can be enjoyed anywhere on flights, at work, on the go, or even in the gym. It's 2021. It's almost 2021. Thank God. And if quitting smoking is on your list of to-dos, I hope it is, because cigarettes are gross. Get rid of your cigarettes, unplug your vape, throw out your dip, and get some Lucy nicotine gum or lozenges. This is the real deal. A subscription to Lucy comes directly to your door each month. It's so simple. You don't have to leave your house because Lucy has delivery down. And for all my CMP listeners, go to lucy.co, use the promo code CMP. You're going to get 20% off all products, including gum or lozenges. That's Lucy, LUCY.co. And use the promo code CMP at checkout. I also have to give this disclaimer warning. This product contains nicotine derived from tobacco. Nicotine is an addictive chemical. You know what else is addictive? Savings. Lucy.co. Use the promo code CMP. We are also sponsored by Adam and Eve. I will be going onto their website as soon as this podcast concludes, because there's a sick vibrator on there I really want to get. I think it's called the Womanizer. But if you go onto adamandeve.com and use the promo code CMP, you're going to get almost any item online for 50% off, which is a pretty sweet deal, plus free shipping. So why not, guys? You know, if things lock down again, you know what I mean? You got to lock down your orgasms. Get a sex toy, get lube. They've got a lot of great stuff on there. Get something for your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your mom. Why not? Go to adamandeve.com. Use the promo code CMP. Whee! Here we go. Yay! I'm so happy to have this guy on the podcast today. I have known him for a minute now. I met him through doing this podcast called The Union of the Unwanted, which now he is the host of, and they are expanding that show to YouTube, which is very, very exciting. He's also the host of the Ripple Effect podcast. Ricky Varandas.
Thanks for having me.
How are you?
Good.
Oh my gosh, like I got so drunk last night, like drunker than a 37-year-old woman should be getting, honestly. I went out after Wet Spot, which is my compound media show, and I went with Gino, Mike, like a couple other guys basically from the network, and this guy Gino, he's the type of alcoholic, he'll like he just makes you want, he's sneaky about it. And he's quit, you know, he like goes back and forth between drinking and not, but he's like, we're doing shots and you don't want to be the one that says no. And then they put out the little cup. And if you do say no, then they take one little cup away and you feel like you're a party pooper. So I was like, all right, I guess I will. They look so small, but I think I had so many shots of Jameson, which I normally don't do. I'm not good at taking shots. I never learned how to like just throw alcohol down my throat. I always just like take the shot and then I come forward and then I just like swallow it on my own time.
About shots that catch up to you because you feel like they don't hate you for a while. So like, oh, I'm good. I can handle another one. And then you're like, oh, I'm still pretty good. I'm fine. And then next thing you know, they all hate you. And that's the thing about wine. It kind of gets in your system quickly. So you know, like, okay, I'm drinking alcohol. You get.
Yes.
But it's also the nice thing about wine is that it does get in your system quickly. So if you need that glass at the end of the day, you immediately get calm and you're like, oh, this is nice, So
I'm a wine person for sure. Although I might not drink for a minute. It was so bad, Ricky. Like I puked on the train, like on the Metro North, which is like not the subway, it's the railroad. It's like, and it was a long in between stops. And I was like,
was there,
and
you live in New York, right?
I
So
live in Westchester. So it's like I have to take the train out. Like we had done the Compound Media show in the city, and then I had to take the train back to
what's
come
open?
home.
Are bars open?
Whew, it's this bar was open. It was just us in there and some construction workers who were like on their last day. Um and like yeah, maybe a few other small groups, but like and this is like Sullivan's. It's like Cheers for Compound Media. Like everybody, it used to be like in before times when fans would come into town, like they'd come watch the shows in the studio and then we'd all go drink at Sullivan's and it's like it's fun. We know the bartender, you walk in, he's got the drinks ready. You're like, I have a problem. And I also like I'm good with 3 drinks. Like if I have more than 3, it's like, okay, I'm deciding to be hammered and I didn't eat anything until so I get back to Grand Central somehow, get a lamb gyro. I'm eating like weird street meat stuff that I never get. It's just like it's open and the guy's right there. And then I puked all over the train. Like it was bad. It was really bad. Like I just was like, but your drunk brain is
Could
like,
be
just
worse.
be
You could be wearing a
still.
mask while puking.
Could be wearing what?
A mask while puking. That
Oh,
could have
hell no. No, I don't wear a mask. I'm just like, suck it. And yeah, you're also right. Like, at least I would have had something to puke into, but it was like far more than a mask's worth of puke. It was really bad. And then I was so hungover today. Like, what is that? Do you know the name of that slow type of dance? Like, it's like a slow martial arts, and like you'll see like an old guy in a Speedo on the beach doing it. Like, what's it called? Is it
Yeah,
called?
I know what you're talking about because I used to do it. I used to martial arts, and I used to hate it. Is it a kata? No, it's
Maybe it's not capoeira. That's like Brazilian
yeah, that's the
dancing.
Brazilian dancing type thing, and that's an interesting story too because that came
Tai
about.
Chi?
It,
Maybe it's Tai
well,
Chi.
all the martial arts do it, where you basically just practice your movements. You're by yourself. You're practicing all these same movements, and the idea is to kind of become so familiar with those movements that you do it perfectly, and your mechanics are perfect, and just perfecting those movements.
Wax on, wax off.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's same type of
So
idea.
when I woke up this morning, so hungover, that's how I was moving all morning. I was just, when you get up and your head is like, no, I was like, I'll just walk really slowly to the bathroom. Like you think that the little things you do are going to keep you from throwing up again. Like I
Did
just
you
won't.
hydrate at least? Like,
Yeah, I did. I'm normally so bad at it. I'm like so bad at drinking water, but yeah, I
well,
had
because when
to.
you're drinking alcohol, you really don't feel like drinking water, but if you do, it's gonna help because a lot of it's dehydration. It just
Yeah.
you're just super dehydrated. And then if you're doing shots, like I'm a wine drinker, but my next love is bourbon. I'm a big whiskey drinker. I love bourbon, and but I do it on the rocks, so I can kind of like pace myself, and every time I sip it. It's a little harsh, so you get that reminder of like, yeah, you're drinking alcohol, so you can't. But when you do a shot, you're just chugging it, and if you're doing something with a mixed drink, or you're using a
Yeah. That's what I usually do, a vodka soda, like classic white girl drink.
yeah, yeah. But at least I mean, if you do soda water, I guess it's better than doing like soda, regular soda, like a Jack and Coke, or because
Yeah.
so much of that sugar, it's what's contributing to your hangover. It's a lot of it. It's the mixed drink. Like my hangover
Oh.
almost completely disappeared when I started hydrating and really just focusing on drinking things on the rocks, doing whiskey and or a glass
Hmm.
of wine or whatever. Because
Because ice, that's more water.
yeah, that's true too. Yeah, as it waters down.
Barely.
Yeah, it makes sense. But a lot of it is just dehydration from all the. I mean, think about how much sugar's in a soda, and then if you drink a couple mixed drinks with soda, ginger ale, whatever it may be. I mean, that's a lot of sugar, and you know, that's definitely going to contribute to your hangover and dehydrate you.
For sure. And that's one of the things I always buy, like a new mug, or like, oh, this water bottle's going to make me drink more water. And then it's just like, no, I just suck at it. I
Have you
just
tried
suck
some of
at it.
those higher end waters with the, you know, pH levels or the electrolytes and
Oh, yes, I have. Like what element or
yeah,
yeah,
and
the
like
fancy ones.
too, and then core makes a good one. But yeah, I mean, the thing is, like I told you when you were on my show, I fast all day. Like today, I haven't ate anything or whatnot. So something that happens from a lack of eating is you don't realize that you get some hydration from what you're eating, you know, and also because of the sodiums and electrolytes, potassium, and all that stuff in your food, it helps you sustain some of that water. So when you're fasting all day and all you're doing is drinking coffee and water, you have a much harder time keeping hydrated. So those waters actually help quite a bit with people who have like maybe migraines or
Oh,
even cramps, you know, or whatever it may be. That
wow.
could be because of a lack of electrolytes and being hydrated. So it's a common issue when you talk to people who are doing fasting or keto type of thing, because like I said, you're not eating, so you don't realize that it really makes it that much harder when you're not eating to stay hydrated.
That's amazing. I'm still like so impressed with the fact that you're able to go all day without eating a thing until, I mean, it's what is it? Like it's 8 o'clock something now?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's not. It's really a couple years ago. It would have been, or you know, probably now more than that. If it was like over 5 years ago, it would have been different because once your body learns how to burn fat for energy, I mean, that's where the term ketosis comes from. You know, the keto diet is kind of like the trendy uh, term keto, but it really comes from ketosis. You're trying to pop your body in ketosis. In other words, you're trying to get your body to burn fat for energy instead of glucose. And there's tons of benefits from it. It's not just a trendy thing about losing weight. There's benefits in regards to uh, cognitive function, you know, and I'm like, I almost caught myself. I'm like, I'm gonna stutter right before I'm trying to on
It's
the fact
okay.
that it helps with cognitive function. But it does help with cognitive function. It helps with because your brain runs off fats for energy. Like if you have kids, one big thing about their diet is like getting enough DHA and healthy fats and all that stuff for and cholesterol, which all helps with your brain function. So that's beneficial with arthritis and joint pain. I mean, if I do a night of cheating or I drinking too much, because usually a glass of wine or two has like zero effect on me or a couple whiskeys. But if I do a night where I really go off the rails, similar to you last night,
Oh God.
the next
Yep.
day I wake up with crazy joint pain. And the second I start, you know, just removing my sugars and carbs from my diet, you know, within, you know, halfway through the day, I feel better and usually by the next day I'm in ketosis and I'm fine again. And so joint pain is huge, especially as you get older. If you're one of those people who played sports your whole lives or
Hmm.
weightlifted your whole life and you have joint pain, a lot of times you think it's strictly just wear and tear in your joints, which obviously that's a contributor. But a big part of it is the things you're eating is causing inflammation, and that's what's causing the pain. You know, arthritis is just inflammation. So it's yeah, there's and then cancer. I mean, I had Dr. Thomas Seyfried on my show on the Ripple Effect podcast, and he's from Boston, I think Boston University. He has like 150 peer review studies. I actually got hooked up with him through Dr. Dominic D'Agostino, who was on my show, and he's like one of the leading experts in the ketogenic diet. But Dr. Thomas Seyfried looks into using keto as a cancer therapy or you know
Wow.
for different things because doctors know that glucose is the energy source of cancer cells. Well, it only makes logical sense if you remove glucose from your diet completely, then you're going to kill or at least starve the cancer cells. So it can help with that. And there's all this research in it, and that's really beneficial to people to get this information, but there's no money in it. There's no money in telling people how to change
Wow.
their diet and cure anything. So it is one of those issues that a lot of these and I think I told the story when you were on my show about Jim Abrams who did Naked Gun and all. Did I tell you? I tell this story all the time. So, but he was, you know, those movies, Naked Gun and Airplane.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So the filmmaker Jim Abrams, he's awesome. I had him on the show, and it was awesome because I had him on for two reasons. One, I'm a huge fan of those movies. Like Naked, I still laugh at Naked Gun, like it's
They're very funny. Yeah.
and then because of his Charlie Foundation, which is a foundation he created named after his son. And what happened was his son had these violent seizures, and they couldn't figure it out. And at the time, this is like the peak of his career, where he had access to all the best doctors. He was famous. He had friends that donated to the hospital so he could cut in line and see all the best people.
Wow.
And years of these violent seizures. I mean, all day having them to you're having some serious negative effects physically and mentally. Having these violent seizures, you're having some negative effects on the family. Like he told us, just really pulled at your heartstrings, a story about how it affected his other children. I think he wrote like one of his kids wrote a letter saying, how can I hate somebody I love? And he was talking about the son who had the seizure, because the parents, so much of their focus, the energy went to taking care of that child, that everybody else felt neglected.
Yep.
It's funny, when I talk to, I always feel like we end up talking about parent stuff, some of our childhood trauma.
I know, and all I am is a step girlfriend.
And so it was a crazy just situation. And then one day he's doing his own research, just kind of, I don't know if he's a library, wherever he was doing it, online, and he runs into this research that John Hopkins did. It was, I think it was early 70s, and they had some success with the ketogenic diet, putting kids in ketosis and curing them of these seizures. And he's like, what the fuck? Like,
whoa,
nobody told me about this. Like, I have access to all the best doctors. I have access to all the best hospitals. My kid has been on, been a guinea pig for pharmaceutical drugs, like on so many different things, which has their own negative effects on him.
Yep.
Then he had a surgery that, now looking back, it looks like wasn't necessary.
Whoa.
But stress on the family, all this stuff happens. And he's like, how come nobody's told me about this? So he told his doctor about it. And his doctor's like, yeah, well, that seems hard. And he's like, what's harder than
that seems hard?
He was like, he was trying to tell Jim that, like, basically that seems like, hey, it could be worth a try, but it seems really hard to get your kid to eat that diet, a ketosis, high fat, moderate protein diet. And he's like, well, what can be harder than what the fuck I've been dealing with? So he puts his kid in on the ketogenic diet.
Wow.
I think it was like, it only took 2 days, completely cured him of every drug. Then
wow.
to show that it wasn't coincidental, years later, his kid gets off the ketogenic diet, and then the seizures come back immediately, and then gets back on it, and they're gone. So, and then he started this thing called the Charlie Foundation, named after his son Charlie. And there's actually a movie called, fuck, I'm gonna have to look it up. I don't remember the movie. It was with Meryl Streep, about this exact this story. It's actually, she's in the movie, and she, it's about his personal story with Jim Abrams. So it's a really heart-wrenching story. But the reason why this story comes up often, I actually just, I just told this story with Dr. Northrup, who was just on my show, on the one I just uploaded.
Is it called First Do No Harm?
Yes. Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, that's it. And it's a real movie about that story. And but so this isn't a trendy new diet per se. I think the popularity has kind of grown of late, but I mean, Dr. Atkins kind of had a very similar diet. This idea of like eliminating your carbs, your body will burn fat for energy. I think the missing link with a lot of people who did the Atkins diet was that they didn't up their fats. There was no like real emphasis on like, hey, you're removing one energy source, which is carbs and sugar, but you need to give your body another energy source, so you need to up your fat. So I think a lot of people who struggle with like lack of energy or whatnot on it, that could be a big part of it. They make keto supplements now, where it's like basically you're drinking a ketone drink, and it kind of puts your body in ketosis without actually, because sometimes it takes a while. They call it the keto flu. It takes a while for your body to adapt to burning fat for energy again. And I say again, because this is why I say it's not a trendy diet. Hunter-gatherers, you go days without eating. I mean, your body pops in ketosis. Many of us have had the experience that you go a long period of time without eating, you're starving, and then all of a sudden you're hungry.
Tired. Yeah. You're like post-hungry. I always call it that, where I'm like not hungry, but I'm just like checked out a little bit. Yeah.
But that's exactly what happened. Is your body just popped in ketosis. It literally just started burning fat for energy, because it's like, okay, you're not giving me glucose, so let me start burning this fat storage. And that's exactly what happens. It's called fat storage because it's supposed to be stored for when you need it for energy. Well, if we keep giving our bodies glucose, then it never burns that fat. So that fat storage just stays stored. So it makes sense. Like the problem is, and to go into like the whole conspiracy with it, is that it's so against what people have been told for so long, because and Gary Taubes has done some of the best work in this with the case against sugar, and then the documentary Sugar Coated's another good one, and then Dr. Lesting, who's done like these big, long, like 4-hour lectures about it. But there's so many good doctors and researchers who have showed how this all happened and how basically the sugar industry, similar to tobacco industry, knew that with very little money you could buy off some doctors and you could get them to give some really bad advice. And that's what happened. All of a sudden, like they were saying that all these issues like heart disease and obesity, all this stuff was because of fat. So what they started doing is they started promoting low fat this, low fat that, low fat, and that's when the craze of low fat started happening.
Yeah.
Well, the problem is like they put such emphasis on fat that nobody paid attention to sugar content, which is exactly the goal. The goal was that. That's why you look at nutritional facts, you would have like, okay, my daily value of this or that or that. But then you look at sugar, there's no daily value. They wanted you to think it was an empty calorie. It was meaningless. Don't worry about it. Look at the carbs, look at the proteins, look at the vitamins, look at all that stuff, but don't worry about sugar. And what happens when you take fat out of food is that there's a lack of taste. So now you need more sugar. So it was a win-win for the sugar industry. And because of them, I mean, how many people are dealing with lack of cognitive ability or being hungry every couple hours or being obese, dealing with weight issues? How many people have died of cancer or diabetes or whatever it is because we've been lied to about our diets? I mean, there's
Yeah.
there's an obvious link there. And to me, like diet and nutrition is such a important issue because one, big pharma has incredible the food industry and the pharma industry have incredible influence on the way we live and on our lives, because if they can affect your health, they can affect your ability to spend time with your friends and family, do hobbies you love, your ability to just be healthy, and if you're an activist, to have the energy to go do something or do a podcast or do fight back. It's like, so
Yeah.
it's a great way. Keep us sick, and it's all symptom management. That's Dr. Chris Kresher, who I'm a big fan of. He's a functional medicine doctor. He has this little metaphor that he uses to kind of explain the problem of modern medicine, but it's absolutely true, and it's an easy way to kind of understand it. Like the way doctors handle situations today, it's all symptom management. It's like you have a rock in your shoe, it's causing foot pain, and instead of telling you to take off the shoe and get rid of the rock, they give you a painkiller for the pain. Like that's
Yep.
exactly what they do. It's all symptom management. They don't get to the root cause of the issue, and a lot of that's also because of financial reasons, because the time it would take to figure out that, like, your diet, your exercise.
Yeah, do a crazy elimination diet and then
Exactly.
slowly adding stuff back.
That's what carnivore diet. I mean, that's the success of carnivore diet. And I've had Dr. Sean Baker on my show. The carnivore diet, I don't think that, and probably 90% of what I eat is meat, but I don't think it's because meat is this magical just thing that we eat and it relieves us of all these other issues. I think, like you said, it's an elimination diet. There's so many things that could bother somebody, from like a spice or something that they're using to marinate the food with. Like there's so many little things that could have zero effect on one person and then harm somebody else. So the carnivore diet works because it's like, hey, you just take something, and that's the thing. Like the majority of us have zero issues consuming meat. And I know I've met some people that are like, "Oh, I don't feel good." I'm like, if you only eat meat alone, I'm telling you, you'll be fine. Like it's usually it's something else that's
It's
making
the
you
food combining. Yeah.
exactly. So the carnivore diet, and you look at Jordan Peterson, he doesn't have a horse in the race. He's not a paleo guy or a vegan guy or
Yeah.
guy. He's a logical guy who's like, hey, this worked, so he promotes it. And same thing with his daughter, and they had long-term issues with like anxiety, depression, all these autoimmune issues. So you remove all the foods that could be causing an issue, everything that could be causing issue, and you simplify it to something that humans have been eating since the beginning of time, and that's animal meat. And and then you start adding things and see what happens. But I think that when you look at the amount of success that people have had who have autoimmune issues or any type of issues, doing that it actually helps them. I mean, you have to take that in consideration. It sounds crazy, right? When you say only eat steak, for a couple weeks and see what happens. And it is crazy because it's fucking boring as all hell. Luckily, like I gave myself a little bit of leniency. I did the carnivore diet for 3 weeks when I had Dr. Sean Baker on, because I'm like, I got to give it a try before he's on to kind of be able to relate to it and talk about it. And so I let myself have a glass of wine with dinner every night. But and it did get boring. Like I love steak, but eating it every night, it's just like, it's like after a while you're like, come on, but I felt great. And I remember Joe Rogan, when he was talking about his experience on it, I'm like, this is the exact same experience. I feel leaner. I have more sustained energy. I'm not hungry. And you eat less because there's a thing called palate fatigue, where if you keep eating just strictly one thing, you'll get sick of it and then you'll just turn it off. But if you'll notice, like when you're eating pizza or whatever it may be, whatever you're eating, and if you have a side, it seems like you'll eat more, because it's like you won't get as bored with it. I do it with my kids. If I try to get them to eat more of whatever, I'm like, hey, have some chips with it or whatever, and then next thing you know, they'll keep eating. So the thing with the carnivore diet, when you do just steak, you'll get so bored of eating it that you just eat less, and
because
so
you're full and you're like not eating for fun anymore. You're just
yeah.
yeah.
And high fat things are very filling too, so people are going to be so pissed. They're like, oh, this is becoming
we're totally rocking everyone's world right now. Yeah.
But hopefully some people get something out of this. But eating high fat foods do fill you up much more, so that's the other thing. So you eat a little less because high fat stuff does fill you up, where if you eat something high carb, pasta, bread, whatever it may be, even if it's filling slightly at that moment, like I said, it's only for a small amount of time. You're slightly full, and then 2 seconds later, an hour later, you're hungry again, because you have this insulin spike, and then it drops and you're hungry again. So it's more than just and it really, like I said, it goes into all these other issues. Like we've been lied to about cholesterol. Cholesterol, same thing. I remember having to go to the doctor with my parents to translate for him, because being Portuguese, they don't speak any English. So I would go translate for him. And I remember like being a kid, and his doctor, or my dad's doctor, always telling him like, hey, you have the highest cholesterol out of all my patients. And I remember I didn't know shit about cholesterol, but I knew that when he told me my dad's cholesterol score, I thought it was his credit score, because it was so high. And I'm like, what? I'm
in
like,
the sevens or something.
I'm like, how can this be? And then like as time went by, but it actually was the beginning of me being very skeptical of what the doctors were telling us, because I'm like, well, this guy's telling me that this is where the average cholesterol should be, and he's like way past that. And I keep coming here year after year translating for my dad, and year after year this guy's saying if he doesn't change his diet, he's gonna die. And year after year I keep coming back, and my dad's not dead, and he's healthy, and he works construction, and he
interesting.
He's a farmer, and he works in the backyard after work, and he's constantly on the go, full of energy. I'm like, I don't know, man. I'm starting to think that this guy's wrong. And then
what was your dad eating?
Oh, well, he eats like a typical Portuguese diet, but the thing is, a lot of it's homegrown, so I think even though he does eat carbs, in regards to like he likes potatoes, and it's fish and meat, typically the Portuguese diet's not too different than like a Spanish diet, where you have your fish, we eat a little bit of fish, or a lot of bit of fish in Portugal, but a little bit less fish northern Portugal, where we're from. But it's a lot of pork and steak and meats and stuff like that. And then potatoes, you always have a side, so similar to like Italians or whatever, you always have that high carb side. And we eat a lot of bread, but a lot of the stuff comes from locally. So like they have chickens, they have we have local bakeries, like I always tell people, I'm like, if you think the shit you're eating is real food, then tell me why when I go to the bakery after 2 days I have to throw the bread out, but if I go get a loaf of bread at Big Y or Stop and Shop or wherever, I'm like, it can stay on the counter for a month and it's fine. I'm like, that's not food. Like, that's not how food is supposed to evolve. I'm like, it's supposed to go bad. I'm like, it's normal. I know it's an inconvenience, but whatever's keeping that food alive, for lack of a better term, you're digesting, you're processing, and it's gonna, I forget who says it, but it's one of the people I like in the our alternative medicine world. They say food's either going to hurt you or help you, and that's kind of the way I look at things. It's like, am I eating something that's helping me, that has some nutritional value, that's going to help me in some way, or is it hurting me? So yeah. So I mean, I think that's the other thing about Europeans in general, is that they eat, even if they're eating the same things Americans are eating, the quality of what you're eating, like, our chickens here are, are just full of steroids, and
Wow.
they're growing at a pace that the Europeans, I mean, a lot of stuff there, it's not that they don't use some chemicals there, but it's less. Like even with wines, for example, and you being a wine drinker, uh, you'll see that wines from overseas are less likely to give you a headache. And that's because, like, especially like
Mm.
California wines and stuff, they'll add stuff to keep a consistency for taste or smells or color, where in Europe they don't care so much. You get a Portuguese wine, like if it's a 2015 and then you get a bottle of a 2016, it's going to be slightly different, but that's actually normal. Like
Yeah.
based on climate and the grapes that year, it's going to be slightly different. It should taste different. It should look different. That it tells me that, like, they're not adding shit to keep it consistent every year, and sometimes that's what contributes to headaches and some of your hangover. And the thing is, a lot of European wines, they could be sold in America as organic, and they're not. In Europe they don't call them organic. It's just like that's just the way they make wine. So and there is some. Have you tried organic wine? Have you?
I have, yeah. I don't like seek it out often, but I normally just buy like the bottles that I know I like, and then I just like look for the label. Like I'm really into Sauvignon Blancs from New Zealand right now. Like I'm on a real kick for that. But like which ones do you like?
I like the Portuguese blends. Portuguese wines do a lot of blends, so it's like 3 or 4 different grapes in there. My dad makes wine. He grew up over
Ooh.
blends, and
Wow.
so like I've always had this attraction to blends, because it's like it's a little bit of everything and not too much of anything. It's never too tardy, too sweet, too anything. It's like you kind of get all these different flavors. But I really like red Zinfandel, believe it or not. Zin is and you want to talk about a wine that will fuck you up. It's hard to find a Zin that's like under 14% alcohol. Like most of them are like 14 and a half, 15 and a half. And knowing how quick wine gets in your system, it's just you get a 15% alcohol wine, like you take a sip and you're just like, holy shit,
Yeah, you're like, whoa. Mm-hmm.
but it's just a deeper color. It reminds me of my dad's homemade wine. I think that's one of the reasons why I like it, because the homemade stuff's a little stronger, a little darker, and so it kind of reminds me of that. But I go through my phases where, I mean, I like exploring. Like I love trying different wines. Sometimes on Instagram I'm constantly sharing, like I'll go to the liquor store and I'll grab like 1 or 2 of my go-tos, and then I'll do like 4 just completely random wines, and from all different countries. I mean, there's one from like Uruguay that I got into. It starts with a G. I don't remember what the name of it. It's like GAZ something like. But I'm like, Uruguay. I'm like, this is weird.
Yeah.
I'm like, try it, and I love it. So it's
Ooh.
I've never had a really like a bad red wine. Like, what's the worst that could happen? I just drink it and then
Oh
get
yeah, I've had one. It's called Franzia. It comes in a box.
a
Yeah, there's Chateau Diane, which you get at the gas station. That's pretty bad. Like that's like a $5 wine. Like, pick that up if we need to like cook with it. But I always like, oh, let's cook with like nice wine. And then it's like my excuse, like, well, it's gonna go bad. I gotta pound this whole bottle.
Yeah, they say don't cook with wine that you wouldn't drink, but
Mm.
I find it hard to not, to use good wine on my food, even though I do marinate all my food with wine or some type of alcohol. But it is, I pop open a bottle. I'm like, oh, I'm like, maybe I'll use a little bit of it, but then you feel bad if but I don't really buy that expensive of bottles anyways, because you can find a lot of good gems, like in like you have the really cheap, and I'm a cigar drinker too and a whiskey drinker, so it seems like it's a recurring theme with these things. Like you have the really high end stuff, then you have the really cheap shit, and then in the middle you can find a lot of good stuff and you don't have to spend a fortune. So that's usually where I hang out. I'll look for,
Yeah.
you know
My favorite Pinot Noir is called Meiomi, Meoimi.
back at it.
And oh, it's so good. And it's like I think I pay 18 or less for it at like like Stu Leonard's wine store or something like that. Like, but that's the only bottle that I'll be like, okay, I'll pay $20 like for
Yeah,
this, but usually
yeah. I
not
mean,
more than that.
I'm the same way. Like $20 is like the limit. I mean, there's some that I'll go a little more if it's one that I know it's really, really good. But when you're drinking it every night, like I drink it every night with dinner, I can't afford a $40 bottle of wine every night. I'm like, that's a huge investment, you know?
Yeah.
So, but I don't know, the liquor stores near where you live, but if you can find some Portuguese wines, I'll tell you, Portuguese wines are the most underrated wines in the world.
I've
And
never heard anyone talk about them. Yeah.
really,
No, I haven't.
well, it's why, and the reason why the cost is so cheap is because of that reason. It's not a fashionable wine. Like people are like, oh, go, if you know jack shit about wine, like, okay, there's some good wines from Napa. Let me go buy a bottle of Napa wine or California wine, or maybe
Yeah.
Pinot Noir from Oregon or whatever. But nobody knows shit about Portuguese wine, like the majority of people. So they can't sell for that expensive. So you can get like really good bottles of Portuguese wine. Like Portuguese wine is one of the few wines that I will find one that's like ridiculously cheap, and I'm like, you know what, I'll give this a try. And it's actually really good. You can get like a good bottle of Portuguese wine for like $7-8 sometimes. And I'm like,
What? Because
yeah,
I'll purposely not buy wine if it's too cheap.
same
Because then
way.
I'm like, well, how much does the actual wine cost to make? Because the bottle and the whatever packaging that all costs something. So it's like, am I really gonna drink a $3-4 wine? I don't know. I don't trust it.
I'm the exact same way, unless it's Portuguese wine, and that's because for some reason they're just below everybody else, and I think a lot of it is because of the lack of popularity
No
and
hype. Hmm.
yeah, no hype. So even the like a really good Portuguese wine, like a $20 bottle of Portuguese wine is like the equivalent of like a $40 or $50 bottle of like Napa wine, you know. Uh,
Hmm.
so it's really really good, and they do a lot of blends, and they have a lot of grapes that are exclusive to Portugal, so you won't know all the blends of grapes that are in there. But I'm a huge fan of it. My wife's Italian and she loves Portuguese wine. It's her favorite wine. And but again, it's the same thing. She didn't know jack shit about like what's Portuguese wine, what does it taste like, or whatever. So, but it is one of those easy gateway wines, like kind of like water,
Gateway.
because it's not too tardy, it's not too dry. It's like you can buy one and have it as a, you don't need to have it with food to enjoy, because I see with Chiantis, like Chianti, like I almost have to be eating to enjoy them. Like it's not a
Because
wine I
it's
can
too
have.
dry or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like it's one of those wines, like, and the thing is, that's a beautiful thing about wine, is like you pop it open, your first sip tastes different than your last sip, because as it gets aired. So it's like it's a whole fun experience, of like opening the wine, you don't know what it's going to taste like, then you're drinking it on its own, then you start eating and you pair it with your
Then
food.
you're drinking it in bed, drinking it at noon, sometimes for breakfast, no
Yeah.
rules.
But it's, now more than ever, don't we need these fucking simple things? Like that's the other thing. Like I'm sure, talking about wine and diet for all this time is maybe not, what everybody wants to
It's
hear.
interesting though. It's a good break from all the other heavy shit we talk about.
Yeah, it's funny because actually a lot of people hit me up when you were on my show about like, oh, it's a good break from all the COVID talk and lockdown talk and whatnot. But I think this stuff it is important, because I think we can get so caught up, and especially myself, because like my show, it's similar to your show where I have many different guests and different topics and different whatever, so you never really know what you're going to get. But it's been so heavy in alternative media,
Hmm.
doctors, and the lockdown and coronavirus, because that topic has been so heavy in our lives. So it's like it's hard to ignore it, because it just, every time you ignore it, some new story comes up, and some, things just keep getting more ridiculous, so you feel the need to have to discuss it. But we can get so caught up in that we forget that, like, the reason why we're fighting these things is so we can
So we
continue.
can drink wine.
Yeah, so exactly. But you're right. Like, so we can enjoy our lives. So shouldn't we not get so caught up into that we stop doing the things that we're fighting for the right to do, and that's enjoy life and experiences and all these simple things. So yeah, I mean, I'm a big believer of being enjoying what you have and not spending so much time pondering on things you don't have. I think too often, especially
Oh
in like
yeah. It's
America,
so
because
easy to say, it's so hard to do. But like I will have moments where I'll be like, you know what? my boyfriend's pretty great. Like I'll bitch about the socks on the floor and I'm like, he's a really nice man, he's pretty good, just like enjoying like, yeah, what you have, appreciating what you have. It's so easy to be like, oh, I want to buy a
Well,
house.
being content is like a word that we look down upon in America. Like and a lot of it, like, like I know your dad's a landscaper, my dad's or he
Wow, good memory.
retired landscaper, right? He's
Yes.
I was in Florida enjoying life.
Wow, you really have a good memory. Jesus, I can't remember shit of what we talked about.
Well, yeah, luckily it was recently, or I probably would struggle much more to remember it. But your dad being a landscaper, he's a hardworking guy. My dad, same thing. But he came to America and brought it, my brother and I here to financially get ahead. And I think it's almost like a trick. It's like, hey, go to America, you'll make more money, which will lead to more stuff, which leads to more happiness, and everything's good, and just follow that plan and everything will work out. Then you get here and you get so caught up in working that, like, for example, and I think we talked about this when you were on the show, or recently I talked about it, where I played soccer growing up, and then my dad was always at work, and he never, even though he's a huge soccer fan, he could care less because he was always at work. So when he got home, it was like, leave him the hell alone because he's tired. And my mom would bring me to soccer, who could care less about soccer, so she would just gossip with the other Portuguese women about what's going on. And so I didn't have any positive reinforcement. I didn't have anybody to discuss what happened at soccer.
Yeah.
So I lost interest. And so but my point of the story, besides getting people to feel bad for me, is the fact that, like, we get so caught up in, like, getting financially ahead and getting these material things, that we forgot that where we came from, in many cases, we're equally as happy or more happy without these material things. So we're like sold this lie. I remember I wrote this song some years ago called and one of the lines was, this sabotaged American dream, this idea that, like, you're supposed to do all these things and it leads to happiness, and then you get there and you're like, wait, I've just gave all my energy, all the best years of my life, everything for these material things, and in the process I've sacrificed my relationship with my friends, my loved ones, possibly my children, my siblings, and I'm not happy. And you see it with celebrities, right? I mean, where you have these celebrities that seem like they're good people, they have their shit together, and then their kids are a fucking mess. And it's like, oh, how did it happen? And I think it's easy to say, oh, they got caught up with the wrong group or whatever, this and that, with the wrong people. And I think in some cases that could be true. But I think one thing that we have to consider is it, if this person is so good at what they do, how much of their time is invested in doing that? Probably all of it.
Yeah.
Which means less time at home,
Spielberg, Tom Hanks, yeah, all these guys with fucked up kids. It's like,
yeah, absolutely. My brother-in-law's, one of his best friends, Rick, and I won't say his name because I don't want him to get in trouble, but he is the principal of a school that's in Massachusetts, not too far from where I'm from. That it's one of those private schools that, and it's funny, I've met the guy, and I did, I just found out now. I knew he was a principal of a school. I just found out recently all the celebrities that their kids go to this school. And
ooh, like who?
I is it so Foo Fighters, one of the Foo Fighters,
Dave Grohl?
no, it's not Dave. It was because I would remember Dave. It was, I don't know if it's a guitarist
Cool.
or somebody from the Foo Fighters goes there, and there's some more people, and there's also a school in Sheffield, Massachusetts, that's it's called, actually, I think, Sheffield School, where it's or Berkshire School. No, it's called Berkshire School. Same thing. A bunch of celebrities send their kids there, and the problem with these schools, and I constantly hear these things from people who are connected to these schools. I know a detail officer, because I work construction too, and I know a detail officer that has pulled over some of the people who, when they do alumni parties and whatnot, and pulled over some of the celebrities that go there. But they're like, you just drop your kids off there, and the school does the raising. They do. It's like, dude, if you didn't want to raise kids, then
Why
don't
did you have them?
Yeah, I mean, it's like, you can't complain about, like, I always say to like, my parents, if I ever ask like, hey, can you babysit or whatever, I'm like, remember, these kids are mine. They're my responsibility, not yours. So if you can do it, great. But if you can't, it's on me.
Wow. How mature of you.
Yeah. Well, some of it's maturity. And then I think also some of it's when I was growing up and my parents came to America, and I came here when I was 4. I remember and it's funny, like the trauma the kids, you don't, it's almost like sometimes you forget that this trauma exists until something causes you to relive it or remember it or reflect on it.
Like being a parent will trigger a lot of your own childhood stuff. Like I talk about that with my therapist all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and the thing with me, like my parents, when they came to America, and we came from like a really poor village in northern Portugal. They're farmers and poor in money, but rich with community
And wine.
wine. They all. I mean, my all my grandparents that I know of, they've all made wine. So like I made wine the first year I moved to the house where I actually live at now because it was built by Portuguese people and there's a wine cellar. And
Aw.
and then once I had kids, it got hard to keep that up. But I want to continue doing it because if not, then like the generation of wine makers in my family are going to stop at me, and I don't want that burden. Especially when I drink it. Like my brother doesn't drink wine, so it's like my dad knows I'm like the only hope of keeping it going. But they were rich with community. We went back to Portugal.
Yep.
We would be there for like a month or 2 months during the summer, and I mean basically my summer vacations were always in Portugal. So like all
Cool.
from growing up was going back to Portugal. And I remember like looking at where my parents grew up. My dad's one of 12, my mom's one of 7. And my dad was raised in a house with no running water. I'm like, how the fuck does 12 people grow up in here? But they're all farmers. So like you go at your own pace. So you work in the fields and all this stuff. And it's funny because my dad would say, he's like, one of the reasons why we had big families, he's like, every child that came to the family is one more laborer you have on the
Yep.
you're popping out employees because what would happen is that you would tell them like, hey, do you want to continue going to school or do you want to like work on the farm? And as a kid, most people would be like, fuck school, I'm gonna just hang out with the family and work on the farm and be with my friends. So like my parents, neither of them, I mean, I don't know how old they were when they stopped going to school, but they're fairly young, but they went at their own pace. And they were you got up when the sun came up, you went to bed when the sun went down. I mean, it was like, which is our natural reoccurring cycle that we should be kind of living in. And I mean, that's why that blue tint on your phone or laptop or computer will keep you up at night, because once you blue, and that's why there's those filters or those apps where you can kind of filter out the blue tint, because your brain's getting these signals that it's daytime, you should be up and going. So but I looked at the way they lived in Portugal, and I when I was a kid, I didn't get it. I looked at the way they lived. I'm like, oh my god, I feel so bad for them. Like, this is fucking crazy. I could never live here. And then like I remember times of like my parents being frustrated with like having 2 kids, trying to pay the bills, trying to find babysitters with lack of resources, being in another country. And also dealing with shitty jobs, because when you're a foreigner, you don't have a lot of options. You have no education. You barely speak or you don't write the language. You barely speak or understand the language. So whatever job you do have, you're grateful for, and you put up with a lot of shit because of it. And so all these things. But I remember, and I go on these long rants, and I forget my point.
I love them.
But so the thing is, when I was young, I remembered these, like the frustration. Like I remember, like especially my mother, because she would be the one watching us 90% of the time, 99% of the time almost, and she'd be frustrated with like, and looking back, I know it's because of work. I know it's because you're in a foreign country. I know it's because of all these things. You didn't have any help, because back in Portugal, it's very similar to like a lot of people when they come, the way things were in whatever country they came from, where you had a community, like the aunts, the uncles, the grandparents, everybody was near each other together. They would help, like
Nice. Yeah.
that's the way. I mean, in other countries, I mean, old homes is looked down upon. Like in America, that's why it was fucking hilarious and frustrating when people in America are like, yeah, but the old people. Listen, motherfucker, I've been to Europe. People take care of the old people there. You know what they do in America? She's an inconvenience, throw in her old home. I don't have time to take care of her. Throw in an old home. So now all of a sudden you care about fucking old people? All these years of throwing people in
What a good point. Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it was frustrating that like people would use that as a justification, like we're in, oh, do it for the old people. You don't give a fuck about the old people. And I'm not saying everybody, but a lot of people are like, if I have to take time out of my job or my day to go take care of my mother or my father, it's like,
Wow.
that's too much work. It's like, well, didn't they do that same shit for you? And believe me, I'm similar to you. I don't have the perfect relationship with my parents, but I do understand, like, hey, if I can help, luckily they're both in decent health or whatnot. But if when that time comes, I'll do my best to try to help them. I mean, I'm hoping that I'm not just saying this and the time comes where I'm like, fuck, I don't want to change diapers and and I'm like, my dad can barely dress himself. I'm hoping that doesn't it doesn't lead to that, that they can still be at some good health even at older in age. But yeah, I mean, it is one of those things where I remember as a kid the frustration, and I remember sensing it. Even and the thing,
Yeah. I could sense it from my parents too. Like I would always overhear them fight. Like me and my sister would be like the top of the stairs, like listening to them fight, always about money. Or like my dad would be yelling at my mom, like, why didn't you teach them to do chores? Da, da, da. It's like, I don't know. He was so like, I just remember him just being shitty to my mom, pretty much.
well, it's funny you bring up money because I have this horrendous ability to really pay attention to money at all, and a lot of it comes from my upbringing. Like I said, my parents were poor. They had this mentality where like making money and saving money is the same thing. Well, if you're not making money, then saving money is your only other option. So we saved everything. I
Wow.
always wore like the cheapest clothes. If I ever bought anything nice, like my mom would let me wear to church and I'd have to take it off the second I get home.
Aw.
And it's so I and so much of our my the only conversations I remember growing up with my parents. I mean, one, I didn't have many conversations with my father because he's a little quieter, and really, what wasn't was at work or whatever. He just wasn't the one watching us most of the time. But 99% of my conversations with my mother was about like, me wanting something that we couldn't afford, or
Huh.
or
Yeah.
how we could save money, or how I should do good in school so I can make money. And it's like, so everything revolved around money. And to me, it was so stressful. And it was so, to me, I'm like, it's just, I'm like, can we, like, I get like it's a necessity, but I'm like, does every aspect of our breathing
Hmm.
day have to be about like, how do I make more of it? How do I save more of it? How do I get more of it? Like, it's just a means to an end, right? It's not, it shouldn't be, your whole life shouldn't revolve around this thing. And there's this guy, Michael Sandel, he was I believe a Harvard professor and philosopher, and he's written a bunch of books, and he had this book called What Money Can't Buy. And one thing that he would talk a lot about is how like we we like capitalism, socialism, all these isms are designed to like basically just figure out like, okay, how do we trade with one another? How do we get a economy working? How do we decide like what the government's involved in, what it's not, how much government should we have, all these things. So it's just like, it's a way of like molding society. And then the problem is like capitalism, which is, we don't live in a pure capitalist society, because obviously we have police officers, we all help pay for the roads and all these things. So it's a mix of things, but a lot of people in America would say it's majority of it's capitalists, and that's why we're so successful. That's what people say. and but the problem is that capitalism has become so deep rooted in our culture in America, and it's become so important that instead of just having a capitalist economy, we have a capitalist society. And Michael Sandel talks about this. And to me, it's so important, because we have to remember that capitalism or any of these isms are just a way, like I said, it's just a way of like molding your economy. It's like, okay, we have this issue. Like, how do we fix it? Okay, we'll use capitalism or some cocktail of capitalism and socialism and other isms, and,
Hmm.
and we resolve that issue. But what's happened is like, no, capitalism is the way we live our lives. It's like, it's about like, everything's about how do you make more money? What job will make you more money? Let's create school systems that push you in a direction of jobs that make more money. Everything's about more.
Yeah.
And
Not what's going to make you happy.
yeah, and like, so I have a daughter who's 4 years old, and I've thought about this, and I've said this to other friends of mine who have daughters, to kind of express like the way we like this type of thinking has synced into all aspects of the way we look at the world. If my daughter was at the age where she was dating, and she was dating, she had two guys she liked, and one, or two guys that liked her, and one of them was like investment banker, the father's a CEO of a big corporate company, and the other guy's a struggling musician who plays gigs at a bar on weekends. I would be like, hey, fuck that dude. That guy's gonna be the guy you have to settle down with. Oh, he comes from a great family. He's gonna financially be able to take care of you.
Right.
Completely disregarding the fact that he could be verbally abusive. He could be somebody who spends all his time at work and will neglect my daughter, you know. And the other one could love her and cherish her and be the best,
Not cheat. Yeah.
not cheat. And so maybe they don't have that, maybe she wouldn't have all the same material things, but she would have happiness, and she would have a significant other, a real partner in her journey, you know, while she's alive. So to me, it's all because of these things. I mean, Thaddeus Russell talks about it, about like our Puritan ancestors. You know, I've had him on the show too, and it's so true. Like this idea that like we still have like some of these Puritan like thinking, where we think
Hmm.
work is always good, regardless if it's fulfilling, regardless if you get something out of it, regardless if it makes you happy. Work's just good, period. You know, like they talk about like people younger than us, you know, like a lot of people are like, oh, the young kids who are coming into workforce, like they don't want to work, they don't want to work overtime, they don't want to, they're so lazy. I'm like, are they lazy, or they have their fucking priorities set? Because
Hmm.
they look at their parents and they like, okay, they bought that house, they bought the car, they have the white picket fence, they live in the suburbs, and they're fucking miserable. They're fighting all the time. They neglected me as a child. Like, why the fuck do I want that? Like, maybe having more leisure time, maybe having more free time is the route to happiness. And time, that's the thing that people forget. Time is the most valuable thing. You can always make more money, you can't make more time. Once that time's gone, it's gone. I've referenced this movie a few times, not because it's a great movie, but because I think it's a great concept. I don't know if you remember the movie In Time with Justin Timberlake, and
No.
yeah,
Have
so
I?
it's an okay
Maybe
movie,
I've
but
seen it.
the concept's really interesting. You know, so basically, you on your wrist you can see the hours, the seconds, the minutes.
Oh, this sounds like an episode of Black Mirror. Like or no, maybe it was that episode was like exactly when your relationship's gonna end, not when you're gonna die.
Yeah, there was a Black Mirror episode that was similar to that. You're right. Well, what the hell? Yeah, I don't recall what it was, but it was something similar to that. But the In Time one was interesting because while watching the movie, I was thinking to myself, like, if everybody had that, you know, on their wrists, the minutes of their lives ticking backwards, and
Whoa.
you had it every day, you could look down at it. You know, every day you decided to maybe sleep in and not do shit, or maybe every day you decide to work overtime on weekends instead of spending time with your friends. You could look down and be like, okay, I'm never gonna get that minute back. I'm never gonna get that hour back. I'm never gonna get this weekend back. And so I think when we wake up every day and you know, we're creatures of habit. We like being in routines. It puts us in a comfortable place. We feel good doing the same routine, but you also gives you this false sense of forever, because you're like, I'm in
Hmm.
this routine, I'm doing it every day, it's just going to be forever, right? And I always say, like, the one good thing that comes out of funerals and wakes is that it's that fucking reminder of like, hey, motherfucker, like, all those people you hear about dying on TV, like you hear about car accidents, you hear about, you know, somebody getting sick, whatever. I'm like, that shit happens, and it could happen to you, and it could happen to somebody close to you. It could happen to a loved one. It could be whatever. And you need that reminder of like, we're human, and you know, don't take each day for granted. And we all say that, right? We say, oh yeah, it's called the present because it's a gift. You know, live in the moment. All these things. And but then we get back to our routine of like maybe holding grudges a little longer than we should, because you know, because we're assholes sometimes, and we don't realize the amount of burden staying mad at somebody is, and you know, and all these things that we take for granted, you know, thinking like, oh, I can watch my kid play soccer next weekend, or I can hang out with my
Hmm.
friends the following weekend, or I can, you know, have a date night with the wife or the boyfriend the next weekend. You know, I'm just going to keep working, keep working, keep working. So, and then you keep working to what? Make a little extra money, which you end up spending on some material fucking shit that you don't really need. And then it's like, okay, what did I gain out of this? I lost that time, which I can't remake, to buy something that gave me some temporary satisfaction. And there was this band growing up. You know, I grew up, I was a metalhead, and this band Hatebreed, that's actually
Oh
from,
yeah,
you know,
I've heard
Hatebreed.
of them.
They had a great album title. when I was a kid, and it stuck with me. I remember having the shirt that said the name of the album, and I didn't quite understand it, but I always just thought about it. It was called "Satisfaction is the Death of Desire." It was the name of the album.
Ooh.
And I'm like, satisfaction's a death of desire. I'm like, that sounds poetic. And I kind of like didn't think too much about it. And then like one day I just started thinking about it and I'm like, you know what? It's like this fucking metaphor that kind of reminds you that all these things are temporary and nothing is more temporary than these material things I keep thinking I fucking want. Like nothing, can there's nothing that's more true to that quote than like material things, because you can want something so bad the second you have it, you're like, okay, it's over, like that desire is gone and you move on to the next thing. But
Yeah.
what is beyond those things? Well, what's beyond those things are experiences and friendships and community and being with loved ones. That's forever. You talk about those moments forever. I think, I talk about on my podcast about this idea of like, people are like, oh, when podcasts first started getting popular, like, why does anybody want to hear people talk? It's like, well, when you go out with your fucking friends and you go out and you have drinks and you're at the bar and you're laughing, you're giggling and you're sharing stories, and or maybe you're even getting deep and talking about some personal trauma or whatever. I'm like, you feel like you grew. You feel like you got
It
something out of
feels good. You feel lighter. You feel like more open, you know.
Yeah. And so that's why, and those are the things that are basically almost free, because I mean, I guess you got to pay for the round of shots or whatever it is. But outside of that, like even if you were, if you're out in the woods around a fire, I'm like, you could have the same experience and just being around each other. And that's the other thing and we haven't talked much about the lockdown or whatnot, because like you said, I think a lot of people do have a little bit of fatigue with it. But that's one thing that also is so bothersome to me and makes me the most angry, is the fact that all these things we're talking about that are important to being sane, to being, I remember having this author, Rebecca Costa, on. She's written like a bunch of books and really interesting woman. And she said that there are studies that show that humans are at their best when they have 6 hours of being social a day. So that's
What?
so,
Whoa. We are in serious depletion of that right
yeah,
now.
yeah, and but it kind of makes sense, right? So how many people can deal with their shitty job because they like the people to work with? How many
Yep.
people, look forward to going to the gym because you run into some friends that you've gone to know, and you always, you say hi, you small talk, you see how each other are doing, all these things. So like so much of our pleasures in life have to do with us being social with other people, and Joe Rogan has said this, and it's so true. I think it was Joe Rogan who said it, where prisons are full with like the worst people, liars, cheaters, all these horrible people, and then they punish you by taking you away from these horrible people and putting you by yourself, which shouldn't be a punishment. It should be a reward. Like, but it's not. It's a punishment, and actually causes psychological, issues. So we're designed to be social creatures, and I think a lot of it is because of survival reasons. Like if you're good at cooking food and I'm good at killing an animal for food, then we know that together, our chances of survival are much greater. Justin Wren, who's a MMA fighter, he's in Bellator, and a really great dude. He's been on the Rogan podcast too, and he was on my show some years ago. I remember him saying this, and it stuck with me. He's like, if you want to go far, you go alone. If you want to go fast, I fucked it up. If you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, you go together. And it's this idea of like, together we can go further. We can help each other out. So it's like all these little quotes, and it's funny because so many of these quotes, you read Mark Twain quotes, all these quotes, like so much of it is just as relevant. It makes as much sense and can be related to your life and who you are today as much as those people did when they wrote it. And that's because regardless if our technology changes, regardless if our environment changes, like who we are as people, our psychology, our desires, our wants, our needs, our the Maslow hierarchy of needs, all these things, like it's those things don't change that much. We still need love, we need friendship, and I say need, and I'm not I really do mean need. I mean,
For
people
sure. Yeah.
themselves, it's one of those things where like if you're by yourself, you can convince yourself of anything. I mean, I've done it where I think I stand on one place on a certain topic, then I get around some friends that that I like to chat with, and I bounce some things off them, and they're like, yeah, but they'll say something and I'll be like, you know what, I didn't think about it that way. But if I never had this conversation with them, I would think I had it all figured out. So it's the wisdom of crowds. It's the idea of like, together we can share our experiences, our wisdom, our research, whatever we're taking in, because everybody's different, our views. And that's why I love the Union of the Unwanted. That was a big reason for it. When if you go back to, now we have a YouTube channel, the Union Unwanted
Yeah.
YouTube.
When did it start?
So it started probably 5-6 months ago. And the way it started was, it's funny how it started. So Midnight Mike, he asked me to come on his show. He wanted to interview me. He's from the OBDM show, and he interviews me. I'm on his show. The next day, Charlie Robinson hits me up and he's like, Rick, you were on the OBDM show? I'm like, yeah. He's like, dude, that's my favorite show. I'm like, really? He's like, yeah. He's like, I listen to every single episode. I'm like, well, let's do a swapcast. I'm like, I've gotten to know these guys. They had me on. Let's all get together and chat. Right. So we got together, we chatted, and then they're all fans of Sam Tripoli, and Charlie's been on Sam's show. So I'm like, hey, let me, and me and Sam kind of got to know each other through podcasting or whatever. So I'm like, hey, let me hit up Sam and see if he wants to join us. So he joined us, and we did, it was a swap cast with me. I love doing swap casts. I've done a bunch of them.
They're so great.
Yeah, and I love just bringing people. I mean, I think there's benefits to both types of shows, like having a one-on-one conversation. You could, like we're having now, you can go a little deeper, and whatnot. But I also think there's tons of benefits of getting a lot of people with different experiences and backgrounds and opinions, and then as long as they're willing to share ideas and challenge ideas, and nobody gets too defensive, it can really be a really awesome conversation. So we were chatting, and then we were talking about censorship. That's how it kind of started. We were talking about censorship and all the issues with like people getting kicked off YouTube and being censored on Facebook and Twitter and all this stuff. And then Mike's like, yeah, we're kind of like the Union of the Unwanted, like,
Aww,
I'm like,
yeah.
but we're, and I joke about this. I was telling the guys, Sam, Mike, and Charlie, I'm like, listen, we could have easily heard Mike say that and be like, hey, that sounds cool, and just moved on from it. Like, oh, that's
yeah.
because I think somebody said something, oh, that would make a cool band name or something like that. And I'm like, Mike, hold on to that fucking name. I'm like, there's something. I'm like, that there's a ring to that, And so he actually bought the domain name, I think, while we were talking.
That's great.
Bought the URL. And then so we do this podcast, and then I'm like, hey, we're in a group text message, and we're talking, and I'm like, hey, let's do a show called The Union of Unwanted. We thought it was going to be like a one-time deal. I'm like, let's get all these people together from alternative media, and Sam's very well known. I've been doing this since 2013. I've been very lucky to have a lot of people on, so I've done a really good job of meeting people and networking, and I don't burn any bridges. I get along with everybody. So I'm like, I think I can get some people on this call. Sam can help. Charlie's also does a lot of interviews for his book, so he could get people on, and then Mike can help us put it together because he's a tech guy. And so I'm like, let's put together this big fucking Zoom conference call. Let's figure out how to solve the censorship issue, right? So we do it. And we had Ben Swan on, and James Corbett, and Luke from We Are Change, and so many awesome researchers and people on that call. And then afterwards, we're like text messaging, and I'm like, because in my personal life, I'm the guy who gets everybody together. I'm the guy who's
you're the connector.
Yeah, every group has that person who like has to take the initiative, because they know if they don't, then every friend's going to procrastinate and you'll never get together. So I've always been that person where I'm like, hey guys, let's do a guys dinner this weekend, or we're doing couples. I'll be like, hey, let's get I'll tell my wife, I'm like, hey, let's go out to eat. Let's go hang out with a couple of friends that we haven't seen in a while, and double date.
Come on, we haven't had an orgy in a while. Let's go.
And so I always was the guy, so it was a natural position for me, and I always found, like, I think I heard Rogan say it, but I'm like, I remember when he said, I'm like, yeah, that's kind of like me. He's like, I'm a cool person collector. I've always been like that. Like, if I meet somebody that's really interesting and cool, then I'll keep them around. And if I meet somebody who's a little fucking crazy, we start filtering them out, and we start, and you get to the age, we're similar age. I'm 35, where I'm just like, I don't have time for people who are going to go out and be belligerent or get in fights or whatever,
or throw up on the train.
Well, that's fine, because I mean, you just drink one, you're not getting any anybody in trouble. And but to me, it's like I don't have time for that. So it's like, once you get older, when you're young, you want to save everybody, right? You have a friend who, like,
Yes. And you think you can, and you
yeah.
think that like they can be changed. It's like, nope. People would have to really want to change. And even if they do, that comes with a lot of hard work. And that's nothing that somebody on the outside can do for you.
And sometimes it's true. They do have to hit rock bottom before, like, and everybody has to just leave them hanging and be like, okay,
Oh.
because how long can you save somebody before you have to save yourself, right? Because they'll take you down with you. It's and life's too short. Like we said, life's too short. It's one of those things where, like, do I really want to spend like the rest of my life like depressed because he's, I'm trying to save this person and I can't, and every
Mhm.
time I try to help them, they disappoint me. It just it does get to a point where, like, and it sounds selfish, I guess, saying it out loud, but it does, it did get to a point where it's like, okay, I have to save myself, or I'm going to go down with them. And I think you do have to get to a point where you honestly made a true effort into helping them, and then you have to be content with that and be like, okay, I'm okay with letting it, walking away from this because I made a true effort. But it's like that saying, they say, when guys date girls hoping they never change, girls date guys hoping they can change them.
Yeah.
It's kind of true, because it's girls do have this nurture
We're
type.
great at settling. Yeah.
That's probably a part of it too. I mean, how many times have I met a girl where, this attractive girl or whatever, and she'll be like, oh, you got to meet this boyfriend of mine, and they'll be talking so highly of them, like super excited about you meeting them, and then you meet them,
And
and
you're
you're
like,
like,
this?
this is what you were excited about. It's like it's crazy. And then the opposite will happen with guys. You'll have a guy who you'll never meet their girlfriend, and
Mm-hmm.
you're like, why are you hiding? Is she 300 pounds? Is she ugly or whatever? And it is one of those things where if you don't feel like she's the trophy wife, you feel like your friends are going to look down upon you, because and to me, like,
Wow. Yeah.
the way I look at it, I'm definitely not the first one to say it, but show me a hot girl, I'll show you a guy who's sick of fucking her. Like, it doesn't matter how beautiful she is, or vice versa, how attractive a guy is. Like, how much of your day and your life together is going to be spent hooking up? Like, at some point you have to talk. At some point you have to meet in the middle in regards to a disagreement you have. Figure out the chores, figure out the bills, figure out all these type of things. So it's to me, all those, everything has to be a part of it. And there's also things that I think are worth kind of sacrificing. Like, if somebody has something about them that bothers you, then I think if they have other things, like, I mean, to me, trust is always one of those things where it was always like top of the priority list. I'm like,
Oh, yeah. If you
I
don't
don't,
have that, you don't
yeah,
have
you
shit.
don't have that. You don't have anything because you don't have peace of mind. I mean, you'll end up in one of those relationships where every time they don't text you
Let
back,
me see your phone.
and who wants to live like that? Who wants,
Nobody.
you know,
Yeah. Who wants to share a Facebook or share an email?
I know
Yeah.
some people do that.
Oh,
It's,
yeah. It's like, all right, somebody cheated. Okay.
yeah, you're probably right. Actually, majority of the time, it is kind of a sign that you don't trust each other. And I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, obviously, social media made it easier for people to creep on like ex-girlfriends or ex-boyfriends and whatever. But the way I look at it is, I can't stop. If somebody has that in them, if they're capable of it, I'm not going to stop them from doing it. And
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
and probably more likely is that if I stress about it, which ends up putting stress on the relationship, then if they were at the threshold of possibly doing it, the friction I just caused by me freaking out about it is going to push them over the edge to cheat. So, and then I will be almost a little bit more responsible for it,
Kind of manifesting it. Yeah.
Exactly. So I think, though, to me, it's like, let me just, if I'm that freaked out about it, maybe I'm with the wrong person, or maybe I need to figure out if it's some internal issues, because in many cases that's what it is, right? I mean, a lot of times it's like, oh, I don't trust any of my boyfriends, or I don't trust any of my girlfriends. I'm like, well, either one, like, because you can't be faithful, you think nobody else,
Yeah.
that's sometimes that's the case, or two, it's not the person you're dating, it's you. Like,
It's
you just
you. Yeah.
and
Or
you
you could be projecting. Yeah. I don't know why I need to fix this light right now, but it's fucking with me. Whatever.
But so when you go to, not to bring up your therapy, I know you brought it up, but uh do you talk more about like your relationship with anybody in like specifically, or is it just internal issues you're trying to deal with? What made
I
you go to therapy?
I got into it. I used to go to therapy. My ex-boyfriend, the one before the one I have now, like he was a comedian and he was going to therapy. He like swore by it and he's like, you should go. So, I was actually talking about this on another podcast. There is actually in New York City a stand-up comedy therapist. Like it's a therapy duo. It's a husband and wife team. And it's like I would be in the waiting room. I would see like a whole show, you know what I mean, in the waiting room, like a whole lineup. You'd be like, oh shit, this guy's here. Um, and then we broke up and I was like, okay, I don't want to bump into him at therapy anymore. So I stopped going for a couple of years. And then I recently, well, God, not even recently, maybe like 3 years ago or 4 years ago, my mom was diagnosed with like brain cancer, which is among the worst cancers. I didn't know at the time. It's like you're pretty much not going to live. And
Sorry.
I started going because I was like, oh yeah, this is gonna be bad. I think I knew it was gonna be bad, and I was like, I wanted to like just get my shit together instead of like, when she passed, like, oh, if I hadn't been dealing with it, like it would be messy and maybe fuck with my work and
Yeah, you
comedy and stuff. So, and also I was like feeling a little bit of stagnation like in my relationship. So I was like, yeah, I feel like I have stuff to talk about. And then you learn that your stagnation and your patterns, your unhealthy patterns are all related to how you were raised and your coping mechanisms as a child, like whatever you have to do to get through the day, right? Because it's like if your parent, like my dad was really scary. Like he was like, I was always like afraid that he was gonna like hit me or, yell at me. It was always like a lot of fear around him. So it's like, I think as an adult that translated to like fear of authority, fear of men. I mean, I definitely went through my icky feminist phase in college, and now that I'm like in my 30s, I can like observe all of that and be like, oh, this is why. And it's therapy is great if you're like, yeah, why do I pick the same kind of person? Or why do I always react this way when I'm angry? And it helps like unravel like why your patterns are the way they are. And if you've also like, if you're in a rut with something in your life, it's good to figure out like, oh yeah, why am I not going for it? Or why am I, if you fear of like intimacy or anything, it helps so much. So, and now I just go like once a week over Zoom. And sometimes I like resent it. Sometimes I don't feel like I have anything to talk about, but I always do usually.
Yeah, I think self-reflection and spending some time doing those type of things are super important. Even when I first got into wines and whiskeys and cigars, it wasn't because I knew jack shit about it. Not, and it's not also because I knew how to enjoy the aromas or taste or smells. Like that all came afterwards as like my palate kind of adapted to it, and I started actually enjoying it. But what I initially actually enjoyed about it was that it forced me to sit down, reflect, and take some time to just be at peace with myself. And you can't drink wine quickly, it's unless it's box wine and you're chugging.
Yeah.
But
It's hard to chug.
yeah, it's very hard to chug. So it forces you to like sit down, take your time, and it just like you don't realize how like just slowing down just slightly, how much more time you have to think, or how many things that happen in a day or the week or the month or the year that you'll start reflecting on if you just give yourself time to do so. And especially in the East Coast, you live in New York, I live in Massachusetts. It's a East Coast issue, I think, more than anywhere else, where like we're always on the go. It's like go to the gym, go to this, go to that.
Yeah. We have like a hustle obsession. And it's like it may not always be like good hustle. It could just be like busy for the sake of being busy.
Yeah, well, it's almost, and this kind of goes back to like our like how work is always good. It's like you don't want to be lazy and just slack around all day. You like go do something. Like I was talking to my buddy the other day, and he was complaining about like how his daughters like stay in bed all day, and I'm like, dude, like they have plenty of time to have to wake up early for a shitty job, like when they become adults. I'm like, just let them
Yeah.
be
I
fucking
mean,
kids.
if they're depressed, that's definitely probably a thing to look at.
No, he just thinks they're being lazy. Like they just want to,
Okay.
they want to. It's like typical kids. You stay up late. I'm like, you're basically most people, and there's exceptions to the rule. Most people are up for the same amount of hours per day. Now it's all a matter of what your sleeping patterns are. Like you're either going to bed earlier and you're waking up earlier, or you're going to bed late and waking up late. But you can still have the same amount of hours of productiveness, you know? So to me, it's like, you know, it's not, I've never been a fan of rules, you know, growing up, like, you know, I stopped playing soccer. I started playing metal. I BMX, I skateboard, I did everything against the grain.
Such a bad boy.
I hated going to you know, Sunday school or CCD, whatever you want to call it. We call it CCD, and I don't even know why, but it's basically Sunday.
Catholic something something.
Yeah, I know it starts with Catholic. Yeah, but and I always asked too many questions. I always went against the grain. I didn't like authority. I didn't like rules for.
Yeah, me either.
And like my son, for example, you know, like today he was complaining about why do kids have to wear masks while playing soccer, but the professionals don't have to, you know? And,
Uh,
and I'm like, you're fucking right. It's stupid.
so you sat him down and you told him all about the deep state.
I did. He's and now he's doing, you know, my taxes. But he, you know, it's one of, I'm honest with him, and I told him, and I mean, I literally told him this like a couple hours ago. I'm like, listen,
It's bullshit.
yeah, well, I have told him
Yeah.
it's bullshit, but I'm like, you don't follow rules just because they're rules. I'm like, if rules don't make sense, I'm like, then you don't have to follow them. I'm like, if it makes sense, then follow them. You know, I'm like, and I told him, like, I wanted to get my point across. I'm like, you don't follow rules just because there's rules. Because the problem with that is that it's, where does it end? Like, he's just going to be a sheeple. He's going to be a person who never thinks for himself. He's going to. I say this all the time to my wife, and because it's the way I deal with things, and I want her to do the same thing. I'm like, listen, when the kids question you on whatever you're telling them to do, take the time to communicate with them, because if you can't verbalize, if you can't justify whatever you want them to do, maybe you should rethink what you want them to do, you know? Like, if it's
Because our parents' generation was like, the baby boomers were like because I said so, and they never talked. Well, at least my parents didn't really talk to me, like really talk to me about shit. It was always like, listen to me or else, you know?
Yeah, no, I mean, and just talking to the kids, like how far it goes. I mean, I've seen so much progression cognitively and understanding the world and themselves just from like having long form conversations. I mean, honestly, we're good at this because that's why we podcast. Because it's like, if I'm going to talk this much, I might as well record it. It's yeah, but it is one of those things where it's like, I cannot understate the power of conversation. I mean, just verbalizing your ideas, right? Because a lot of times things it's almost like, you ever have that word where like, well, I've never said it out loud, you know, and then like you go to say it out loud, like, I know this fucking word, I think about it all the time, and now I'm like hesitant to say it out loud, or I say it incorrectly because I've never said it out loud. It's like, it's the same thing with your ideas. Like, in your head, things make sense.
Oh yeah.
And then once you verbalize them, like sometimes you're like, okay, I didn't really think it out as best as I thought. Or like once somebody challenges you on it, I'm like, you know, like I had Scott Horton on my show. You know who Scott Horton is? He's like a
Heir to the Horton coffee throne. There's like a Horton's coffee brand called, no, it's Canadian. I'm sure it's not him. I was trying to be funny. I'm sorry.
He's a wait, it's it's okay. It keeps things light, but it's so he's a really famous libertarian, and he's one of the most knowledgeable people in regards to like foreign policy and geopolitics. But during the whole lockdown thing, I've heard him kind of like, it seemed like he was kind of like I don't know, believing what was going on, you know. So and I was getting views of not people online actually, but mostly people who know me from like my community and where I grew up, saying like, oh, you only have people on your show who you
Who
agree with.
agree with? Yeah.
And I'm like, you know what? So let me start having some people that you know, because I'm willing to talk to anybody and everybody. And I had Scott Horton on. We had like a whole hour and a half conversation about like me challenging why he believes what he believes. He challenged what I believe, why I believe what I believed. And I like it as a exercise, because to me, like,
keeps you sharp.
yeah, well, one, it keeps me sharp, but it's never about just like being right. It's about like, well, if I can't defend it, to this extent to somebody. If I can defend it against some idiot, then what good is that? Like, but if I can defend it against somebody who's intelligent and also has well thought out ideas, then that means that maybe I'm in the path of actually finding some type of truth or answers. So to me, that's super important. Just being able to have a discussion with somebody who can be civil while they challenge your ideas. I had Greg Palast on also, who obviously he's like very lefty. He's been on democracy now a bunch of times, and very big into like the BP oil spill and the environmental issues and whatnot, but he's left leaning. And I had him on my show. We disagreed on a lot of stuff. I had Dennis McKenna on my show,
Mhm.
Terrence McKenna's brother, Dennis. And the first time he was on years ago, we had an amazing conversation about like big pharma and plant medicines and all these things that I agree with, and I still agree with today. You heard me talk about diet nutrition. I'm a huge fan of like uh, functional medicine and using food as your medicine and all these things.
Yeah.
So my views haven't changed that much. But even somebody who his brother is like the godfather of psychedelics, and I know he's done a bunch of psychedelics, even that doesn't prevent you. It doesn't make you immune to political propaganda, because 2 seconds into our conversation, he's talking about Joe Biden and how Trump this, Trump that. And I'm just like, holy fuck. Like, I've heard Rogan say this about like, oh, just give everybody mushrooms and they'll be fine. And I'm like, I remember thinking that when I was talking
Yeah.
to Dennis McKenna. I'm like, well, I know he's done ayahuasca, he's done mushrooms. So apparently you can't just give people psychedelics and think that it fixes things, because sometimes the propaganda is so strong. They've done such a great job
It's
demonizing.
insidious. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
just,
That it's so deep in your psychology. And this goes to upbringing. You brought it up. So much of what happens when we're kids stays with us forever. Like, I could deal with some trauma in my 20s or 30s, and I could deal with it fine. I could recover from it. And if I dealt with the same trauma as a child, it stays with me forever. It molds and affects and influences who I become. Like, it's crazy. I mean, you think about conversations you have with like adults or teachers or coaches or friends or whatever, that stick with you forever, and sometimes you don't even understand why. Like, why did this specific conversation, I had probably billions of hours of conversations with people. Why did this, why this, and so we never know what sticks with people. And that's also, one of my points about like why I call it the ripple effect podcast, because I truly believe in the ripple effect. I believe in, we can all have some impact, and we never understand how big of a effect that impact can become. And you look at people like influential people like Martin Luther King, for example. He might have had conversations with somebody that's completely unknown to the public, but influence him to do what he did, or
Mhm.
influence him to have the ideas he had. Or maybe he read a book of an author who was this struggling writer who never sold jack shit for books but had these amazing ideas, and he read that book and it influenced him to become this influential person. So really influential people are usually, or in all cases, influenced by lesser known people, and we could be those people. So even so many of us say,
You're calling us lesser known. Yeah.
well, compared to Martin Luther King, I would say. And- but it is one of those things where like I think that this idea that we can't do anything, like I hear people say it all the time, is even during this like COVID lockdown, like, what can we do, what can we do? I'm like, talking about it is something, and it's a step in the right direction, because the alternative is do nothing and just go and just follow the rules, and then it just keeps
Yeah.
getting worse and worse and
And
worse.
why do you think they're trying everything they can to prevent crowds from gathering? Like, you can go to a restaurant, but once you start drinking, then you really start talking. And we don't want that. We don't want that. Every period of great, like, human enlightenment happened in like a coffee shop or like in groups where people could gather. And they're trying to squelch that right now.
And then the masks are muzzles. I mean, you're trying to shut people up. You're trying to prevent people from small talking, from discuss. I mean, all
Yeah.
the
Don't get close. Don't talk.
don't talk.
And then who the hell is that? You can't even tell who anybody is unless your eyeshadow is like on point, which who has the patience for that, you know?
And how important is somebody's smile? It's like it lightens up your day. It makes you feel better. It makes you feel more like you're more approachable, so it's like there's all these benefits to it, they say when babies are born that they immediately can like start picking up on social cues because it's their only way of communication, so they'll pick up on tons of little things. and
Huh.
um and so we're naturally designed to like pick up on those things. So now you've kind of like you hidden that from, so you're putting stress on our ability to figure out like, okay, when I'm talking to this person, are they enjoying talking to me? Am I being
Yep.
annoying?
They're like encouraging all this divisiveness and like just pumping so much gas into the racism bullshit narrative. And then you can't even tell what somebody's face looks like. So you're like, "Oh, I'm sure this person of a different color hates me and I can't see their face. I can't even check. And we're not supposed to talk to each other. We're not supposed to get close." So it's like fear and the propaganda, and it's like it's doing a pretty good job of keeping a lot of people separate, but although there's a lot of people coming together quietly and not so quietly, waking up to it all.
divide and conquer, right? Just like keep dividing us, keep us fighting among ourselves. And I mean, you look at like Schwab from the World Economic Forum, he wrote his book COVID-19, The Great Reset. Does anybody know if he's a Republican or Democrat? Does anybody know if he's Catholic, Christian, Jewish? What is he? No, because these elite don't give a fuck. Like these are things we fight. Do we know where he stands on abortions or third bathrooms or
Hmm.
transgender? No, because those things are things that we fight about. People below them, Um, so it's the things that we're fighting among ourselves, while those who are in power could care less. Like they could care less about this stuff. They care about, they have a vision. And they're forcing the way they think the world should be upon us. And uh, all these other small issues are just things to keep us occupied and distracted. And you see it, and it works over and over again. I mean, the other thing too is like, we're told don't ever bring up religion or politics at a dinner,
Yep.
that and I think it's a clever plan or trick to get us to not talk about things that are important to us, or things that could actually help us better understand ourselves, or the world around us. Because we can argue all day about sports. I mean, we're East Coasters. I mean, people are very passionate about their New York teams. People are very passionate about their Boston teams here. I mean, I've seen heated arguments with like Patriot fans and Steeler fans, or Patriot fans and Giant fans, or Celtics fans and Laker fans, or New York fans, whatever it may be. And I was hesitant to bring up New York because they haven't been relevant in such a long time. But
Burn.
I'm talking about the Knicks. But yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things where like, you can get in a huge argument about the Celtics and the Knicks, and nobody ever says like, I told you not to bring up sports. How dare you ruin
Yeah.
dinner? But if you get in a confrontation about anything else that's even slightly important or serious, people look at you like, oh, you shouldn't have brought that up. It's like, whoa, so we shouldn't be discussing the important things. We shouldn't be talking about the important things. Like, well,
No, yeah, nobody ever says like I think at Thanksgiving, like my dad might have been so close to being like, don't bring up pedophilia at Thanksgiving at the table, like, but it's important. But that should be added in the catchphrase too. It's like all the things that are important, right? That you get heated about, that are worth changing somebody's mind over. It's like, don't talk about them.
yeah, I mean, it seems like it's a great strategy to get us to not talk about the important things. And the thing is, when you do talk to people about these things, you can have a civil discussion about it. In many cases, you'll start seeing their brain, like their gears start moving, and be like, oh yeah, that shit makes sense. And even if you don't get through to them in that conversation, you're chipping away at what the mainstream propaganda has
Yeah.
exposed them to. And you never know like what's going to be like the rock that breaks the glass, but it's like you're helping chip away, you're cracking it a little bit. Then they run into somebody else who has similar ideas, or another podcast who talks about the same thing, and then that puts another crack in it. And the next thing you know, the illusion of how you see the world just completely shatters, and you're just like, holy fuck, like this was my waking up period. I mean, I ask people all the time on the podcast, like, oh, how did you get here? Like, what red pilled you? What
Hmm.
led you to question things or whatnot? And in many cases, like you can see, like it wasn't one moment. Maybe it was a movie or a documentary or author or whatever that maybe push you over the edge. But it was a lot of baby steps before you got there. It was a lot of like, okay, I ran into this, I ran into that, and then this started making more sense. And it's same thing with like the cholesterol thing. Like I was saying about my father, the story about my father, like that was the first thing that made me skeptical about like what doctors and what mainstream nutritionists were telling me. It was like, oh wait, like you're telling me cholesterol is like going to give people heart attacks and all this stuff. And then there's great research on, and I forget what her name is, but she's I believe a British or Australian uh, scientist and author who talked about how pharmaceutical companies actually understood that it was beneficial to have what they considered the average cholesterol levels numbers low, because that means more prescription drugs, right? So,
Wow.
I mean,
That's how
which
they get you.
yeah, well, you think about it, like something as simple as like, okay, whatever they say that like you get to this number, then you can suggest a prescription drug. Like if you just change that number a little bit, like that's billions of dollar difference. Like, so it's like, what incentive would you have of like, of not doing that? You don't, you would be like, okay, let's keep it. So we'll tell everybody that like, once you get here, it's like, oh, maybe you should think about getting on a pill, and whatnot, even though the pill is probably more dangerous than your cholesterol
Because
levels.
then you'll need another pill to correct the side effects from that first pill.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, we solved everything, Ricky. Ricky, I know you got a jet, and thank you for staying even longer to chat. I feel like we could easily talk another 3 hours. Where can people find you, follow you, and so watch The Ripple Effect and the Union of the Unwanted?
Well, both shows are now available. The Ripple Effect podcast is the show I've been doing since like 2013. I'm at like 200 and like, I don't know, 60 episodes or 80. I don't know where I am. High 200s, and that's what I've been doing for a while. You can find all that stuff at the rippleeffectpodcast.com. It's on YouTube. It's now on Float and Odyssey. It's on what's the other one? BitChute. So I'm migrating a lot of my stuff, my archives, to these other alternative platforms, because I know it's just a matter of time before YouTube probably gets rid of all of us and just keeps the cat videos and how-to videos. But so that's my main show. It's you can follow me at RV36 on Twitter, Parler, where else? Instagram, Facebook. I have a Facebook page for the Ripple Effect podcast. I also have a personal Facebook page. Feel free to connect with me. Just let me know you're not a bot, and we can connect. And then the Union of the Unwanted, which is our kind of roundtable alternative media hangout show, which we started, and I kind of told a story about that show. We do every other Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern time, and then it's uploaded. It's open source. All my stuff's open source. I let people post it wherever they want. So this show, I kind of continue to the same thing, the idea of like posting it wherever they want. So you could find it on any of the participants' RSS feed. So it was on the Ripple Effect podcast RSS feed. That the reason I'm discussing this is because I'm not sure if we've decided if we're gonna only put it on the RSS feed of the Union of the Unwanted and not everywhere else like we have been. But either way, you can find all the past shows on my YouTube channel and my RSS feed. But now the Union of the Unwanted does have its own YouTube channel, RSS feed. It has its own float page, Instagram, Twitter, all that stuff. And so it's if you want to hear one-on-one conversations like this, listen to Ripple Effect podcast. And if you want to hear a big group chat and or just want to hear less of me talking, because in the group chat in the Union Unwanted, there's less people talk, less opportunity for people to go on long rants like I've been doing most of the show, which I apologize for. And
I love it.
So yeah, you can check that out. And so it's just, Union Unwanted, Ripple Effect podcast, and you can basically search either one of those shows on any platform and you can find it. And hopefully we have you on a future Union of the Unwanted. We are do a UK, because we have a lot of international podcasters and alternative media people that the 7 p.m. Eastern time start time is kind of hard because they're 5 hours after us. So we're thinking of doing maybe a Saturday afternoon or Sunday after, something that's earlier in the day, so we can get all the UK people. So if that will work for you, I'll keep you I'll keep you in the regards to that, because I know that'll be a little easier. I hate for you to change your whole schedule to make these shows, but I think it's taken off. I think people really like the fact that you can grab a bunch of people from different backgrounds and stuff and show that we can have open discussions, agree on some things, disagree on other things, but always be civil about it. I think there's a need for that. We're all getting a lot of positive feedback in regards to just people really being happy that they could hear people just talk without fighting, because so many people in their own personal lives couldn't talk about any of these topics without being at each other's throat. And I think also a lot of people just needed to hear that other people were feeling and thinking the same things they were feeling and thinking, because when you're surrounded by people who are brainwashed, sometimes you feel like you're on an island
I
where
feel like
it's
you're the only crazy one in your group. You're
yeah,
like, am I weird? And it's like, no, they're weird. You have to just come find us.
yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's what people like about podcasts, that. And I think two things. I think that's one huge aspect of it. And I think honesty, that's what I love about your show and your style, is that you're super honest. You talk about personal stuff. Hopefully you're like me and your family doesn't really listen to the show. So you're,
Oh, they couldn't care less. I love it. It's the best.
yeah. So which in a way, initially, I'm sure it's a little disappointing, but and then after a while, you're like, you know what? It
Then
gives me,
it's freeing. Yeah.
yeah, it is freeing. So, but I think people appreciate the honesty. I think that's what attracts people to many of the more popular podcasts is the fact that, like, hey, just be honest. I think it's what attracted people to Trump, to be honest. I mean, I think, like, okay, maybe I don't
Yeah.
like all his flaws, but I know
What
who
you're
he
getting.
is. Yeah, I
Yeah.
know what you see is what you get. Like, and he couldn't fake it if he wanted to, because sometimes he says too much and he doesn't know when to shut up or whatever, or he goes off the rails. So I think in a world full of fake people who are trying to sell you agendas and propaganda, it was refreshing just to hear somebody and see somebody who's like, okay, well, yeah, he's not perfect.
Yeah. He's a little messy, but it's like, come on. He also like isn't a pussy, which we needed. So, and I think still need. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. So yeah, without a doubt, I think that people did like that aspect. Same thing with Bernie Sanders. I think Ron Paul, Dennis Kucinich, uh, Ross Perot, anybody who's like, okay, I don't agree with everything they say, but I know who they are. Instead of
Hmm.
being like, I think it was Mark Twain who said, like, if voting mattered, they wouldn't let you do it. It's one of those things
Oh,
where, like,
yeah.
politicians will tell you, like, hey, I'll do what this and that for you if you give me your vote, and then you give them their vote, and they do the complete opposite. They could care less. So is that what people want? I mean, is that just somebody who's really good at lying to you? I mean, we all, that's the other thing about psychology of politics. It's like we're pretty knowledgeable in regards to understanding that even the speeches, right, and not for Trump, because he most of the time he was winging it, but the history of politics, the speeches, everything that's written in that speech, the way they phrase things, the way they what they talk about, what they don't talk about, the way they word things, like every specific little thing is thought about, it's observed, it's for a purpose of pushing trends in a certain way, to push your perspective in a certain way. So we know it's all illusion, it's all fake, but yet we're like, hey, that guy did really good in that speech, he's a good speaker. He didn't write it. It's not him.
Mm,
He's just a
yeah.
fucking puppet, and we're pretending there's not a hand in that puppet that's telling him what to say. Like, and we're falling for the illusion, and but I think it's the part of it. We're still primitive creatures, and some of our habits are hard to break. I mean, you look at, like, a fake breast, right? I mean, it's kind of a similar
Want to
example.
see mine? No. I'm just
It's
kidding. Mine are real. I don't have money. Yeah.
it's similar because it's like, even though males know they're fake, it still stimulates you, like, they're real, even though they're fake. Like, I'm
Some
being,
doctors are very good. I mean, like they've made strides over the years.
oh, I'm sure, which but
I just see a lot. I just know a lot of porn stars. So
yeah, you've interviewed quite a few on your show, which is in many cases way more interesting of a conversation than I think people would think, right?
people really like there's a group of people that are like pleasantly surprised. And there's oh, just like with any profession, there's people who are great conversationalists and there's people who are not so much. So it's like you get it. You're in a physical job that's looks based. Your personality is not always like 100% needs to be on point. But like, so yeah, like not everyone, just like any other, you might have a dentist who's like not funny, but guess what? That doesn't have to be part of his job.
Yeah.
So when you find a porn star that's like funny and smart and like loves to talk and is quick, it's like the jackpot. And I think even with that being said, like you'll still have a group of people that are like just judge right off the bat. Maybe they're super religious, maybe they're like uber conservative. They just don't want to hear anything a porn star has to say, which is unfortunate. But then you meet like I had one with Christy Canyon. She was huge in the 80s and it was so fun. She's just talking about like all these famous comedians that she had slept with. She was like Dice, and I think Louis Anderson is gay. I tried to sleep with him. They all told me not to. So it's fun. It's fun. You can like learn little tidbits. Ginger Lynn slept with George Clooney. She was on Wet Spot last night. So it's fun. I just love talking to people. So I like trying to find what the interesting nugget is in a person and then like trying to get it out.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I think, I know you had Ann Coulter on your show once, and I mean, I'm the same way. I'll talk to anybody. I mean, I'll talk to somebody from the left, from the right. If I have the opportunity to talk to them, unless I think like they're really like pure evil, but it's I mean, I've had Jack Abramoff on my show. I've had, a lot of people I don't agree with, but if you're willing to share ideas, challenge ideas, talk, share our personal stories, we might be able to get something out of it, and so I think that's worth doing. And I think when you have long form conversation, you get to the human aspect of the person, which makes them, it's almost like when you get in a fight with your significant other. It's like, I think communication, even if you still agree to disagree at the end, just trying to understand each other brings you a little closer. So it's like, at least if I disagree with you, at least I have a better understanding of where you stand and why you stand there, so which I think can be really beneficial. So I love when I see shows like yourself that's you're willing to have anybody on, even people like Ann Coulter, which people hate, and then you
Gavin
have
McGinnis. I still can't
McGinnis,
believe
yes.
that episode's still up,
Yeah,
but
it
don't
is
want to
funny
jinx
that it's
it.
still up. Yeah. You've had quite a few people that should get you also in some trouble on YouTube.
I think it is because I mix it up and I have porn stars and comedians and I'm confusing the algorithm. Who knows?
Algorithm. But yeah, thanks again for having me. I really appreciate it. Hopefully I'll see you on a Union of Unwanted very soon, and I'm sure we'll
Yes.
chat again.
And I'll definitely have you back.
Thanks, Christy.
Yay.